Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're very, very excited and to be here tonight. For those of us who haven't had a chance to see Hugo, this is a wonderful opportunity. So enjoy the evening.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming to hear me talk. Before I start, I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. I'm Hugo Tabar. You might have heard of me, I don't know. And I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but you know, I'll take it anyway. I have a varied background. I'm half South American and half Australian, and originally I started studying engineering, and I wasn't really into that, so I kind of went on the hippie trail a little bit and ended up in India for 3 years studying just philosophy, hanging out in ashrams and monasteries, meeting all these spiritual people and everything. And when I was in India, in the ashram, I saw this guy doing kinesiology. And he was in my room in the ashram. He was Australian, in fact. And he was muscle testing. Muscle like this, which is kind of, now that I'm a kinesiologist, I think I've never seen anyone else do that. But anyway, he'd get people down and tests like this, and he had a bag of flower essences and he would be going like this, you know. Sound familiar, right? And I didn't think much of it. In fact, I wasn't that interested in it, really. And then just before I went back after 3 years, a little voice in my head said, go back to Australia and study kinesiology. And I just thought, oh, I'm going to go back to Australia and study kinesiology. And I came back. I'm from Melbourne originally, and so I was hanging out in Melbourne, met a few people, and somehow I got to meet Charles in the college in Melbourne, the first RTO, and it was the first diploma, and I was in the second year that went through that. And just at the end of my studies, you know, like we have these 8-day modules, and at the start of each module we'd be assessed on the module before, and sometimes we'd get the trainers or they would have assistants assessing us. And for the first time, Charles assessed me, and we were doing the brain stuff, you know, amygdala and all this, and he goes, show me position 5 of stomach. And I had this cool technique where I worked out if you, you know, once you've got the referencing circuit, that if you move it through its range of motion, when the muscle changes, when it's actually in its range of motion. You might have been shown that technique. And so Charles got me to do it 3 times, and I thought that would be weird. Never said a word, and then that was on the Saturday. On the Monday, he actually presented it as a major breakthrough in kinesiology, and rang the people in Europe. They had been teaching it that weekend in Europe, and you know, and I was shocked. You know, I was like, oh my God. And I had all these other ideas as well. And so I thought, oh, maybe I should start actually writing these down and researching it. And this was the beginning of my first 2 courses, which was chakra hologram and brain hologram. And I believe you've had a version of the chakra hologram over here. And so from there, I started showing people, and Charles invited me to go to the conference in 1999 in Tucson, Applied Physiology, and I went there, met all the people from Europe with the big institutes in Europe, and they took me over there, and I've been traveling all over the world teaching kinesiology ever since. I had no idea that would be my life. And since then, people keep coming, and I keep going, well, I've got another idea, and I write another course, and people come, and they love it, and they keep coming, so I keep doing it, and so here I am. And I'm really happy to be here, because in fact I have a lot of family over here. My brother lives here for over 25 years. My aunt's been over here for like 40, and my other uncle's here as well, so I'm just so happy to be here, to be able to come and share the kinesiology and hang out with my family at the same time. So anyway, that's my history, and here I am, and we're going to look at this this talk. I mean, I've got various talks. I've presented at over 35 conferences around the world, and I've got quite a number of talks I can do. And this, we're talking to, I think it was Michelle on the phone, and she said, oh yeah, let's do this trauma. People want to interested in that. As you'll note on the thing, it says Hugo and Alexandra Tabar. And Alexandra's now my ex-wife, but she helped me write this. She's a psychologist and does a lot with trauma. So there's a lot of stuff in here, all the technical stuff that came from her. And we worked on this presentation together. So, what is trauma? And so first of all, I know a lot of you have been well trained, and I've seen that with the people I've been working with here over the last 4 days. But I'm just going to go through a few concepts that we have, and it might be similar to what you have, it might not, I'm not sure. But we'll just make sure. Hang on. Okay. Okay. So first thing, I'm going to talk about, just a quick talk about stress, because it's a very important concept that we have, and this is the so-called 3 phases of stress. You've all probably seen that, right? You know, just about everyone in kinesiology teaches it. I actually refer to it the 4 states, because there's a state of no stress. So if you think of a state of no stress, then first stage, second stage, and third stage, there's basically 4 possible outcomes while you're working with kinesiology. And to me, kinesiology is a stress management technique. You know, what we do is we manage stress, we remove stress, and then we see what happens in the system of the client or the person who's receiving it. And sometimes there's miracle healing, sometimes nothing happens, sometimes they feel worse, and all these things, because various things can happen once you start taking the stress out, and depending on how compensated they are. So we've got the 3 stages of stress here, and what we do is, you know, we have this model of, well, there's 4 possible responses of an indicator muscle. Now, I know a lot of you are probably trained in AP, where you've got those 7 think states, because you've got over facilitated and under inhibited. But I'm just looking at that as one possible outcome, because if it's over facilitated or under inhibited, the muscle's jammed. So the muscle's jammed, or it's not jammed, or it's very weak and you can't tonify it, or you've just got the indicator change, or nothing happens, you put something in and nothing happens, it's just how it was. You know? So 4 possible outcomes. You've got the 4 possible stress stages, including the no stress state, and you've got there what happens what happens with the indicator muscle, assuming it's a locking indicator muscle. You've got no change, it's still locked, but you can sedate it. If it's the first stage, it unlocks, but you can tonify it. The second stage, it's over facilitated, it's locked, but you can't sedate it. And the third stage, it's under facilitated, so it unlocks and you can't tonify it. With fear, because we are talking about trauma here and fear, and it's all related to post-traumatic stress disorder and all these kind of things, you've got no fear, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress once you get into the third stage. Because what happens when you look at the physiology of stress and the adrenal glands, like in the first stage, you've got adrenaline, and from the adrenal medulla running around the body, it's like, oh my God, there's a tiger, I've got to run, I'll get up the tree until the tiger goes, it's gone, that's okay. Fear's gone, that's adrenaline. Then the second stage you've got is with cortisol and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and what happens there is all these hormones released, you get high levels of cortisol, and this is where you live in that state of compensation over long term, and they call it long-term stress. But in the third stage is interesting because cortisol is in low levels. People in post-traumatic stress disorder, when they test their cortisol levels, they're very low. So if anyone's got low cortisol levels, then they're actually in the exhaustion phase in the third stage. That's the physiology of it. Right? And I knew a friend once, and she'd moved out into country Victoria, and she had a blood test and it was low cortisol. And we were talking about it. I didn't understand what that meant at the time, But we were just like, wow, what's that? Low cortisol, that's weird. And she was so stressed out and like really had to go out there and spend all this time just to get over the stresses she had in her life, which included divorce. But anyway, that's another story. So with fear, we can certainly look at, you know, if fear is the stress, that is the relationship between those four states that we've got up there. Okay. So where does stress come in, you know, and how does stress, you know, like what happens is that the with stress, you have the stress can come in at different levels. Sometimes you're aware of what stress is, what's stressing you out. It's conscious. You know what it is. Okay? So that's in the cortex. And sometimes you can have subconscious stresses that, you know, like you go, oh God, I'm stressed out. You're aware you're stressed out, but you don't know what it is. That's a subconscious stress. Or it comes in the limbic system where you've got your memories and emotions, and often the amygdala and hippocampus, they're all involved with that. And then you've got down in the reptilian brain and brainstem, you've got the unconscious stressors. And these are often when you're stressed out and you don't even realise you're stressed out. It's completely unconscious. It's like you have to have someone to tell you that you're stressed out. And then from there, I mean, it's very simple. Like if you know, understand the neurology of how this works, you've got, you know, like, you know, you got stress happening, your amygdala decides, okay, we're going to be emotional. It goes down into the brainstem and the PAG says, okay, we're going to do emotion. So it then organises the response in the body, which can be sympathetic, and also in the muscles. So the physiology of a muscle test, you know, when people say it's not work, that's absolute crap. A muscle test is a neurological event. You're working with the neurology, and if it's jammed, it's because there's stress in the nervous system. You know, and then when people say, oh, you know, people who criticise kinesiology, they don't understand what they're doing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there doing kind of weird stuff in the name of kinesiology. But if you use it properly, it's actually a neurological event that can demonstrate the level of stress in the system. That's what a muscle test does. It doesn't divine the future. I remember I was in London with these guys, and we went out. They said, oh, let's go to this country pub for dinner. So we went out, and then we lost. And they're there, which way do we go? Muscle test, this way or that way? It was funny, you know, they tested that way and they were right. You know, and so, but you know, it's like what you're testing is which way stresses me out more, this way or this way. Okay, that way, you know, so it's probably in their subconsciously they knew that was the right way, but they just didn't have any conscious awareness. But the nervous system knew and said, yeah, better go that way. Okay. So formatting. Now, I know a lot of the people here have used it, and it was developed by Richard Utt. It's a combination of acupoints and mudras, and this is interesting because mudras actually are used in the Indian yogic traditions for millennia. And the word mudra, I mean, I was so fascinated. The word mudra actually means attitude. That's what the word means. And I looked it up. I said, what does attitude mean? And I'm looking up, you know, I was in the States at the time, or America, so it was a Webster's dictionary, and it said that attitude, the various different descriptions, but one of it is body position. And I thought, oh my God, it's like asanas, right? You do a yoga asana, and then I've got a book on yoga asanas, and it talks about, okay, which asana affects which chakra. So you're working with the Nadi chakra system, and so then when you do mudras are like mini, like holographic representations of asanas. That's what they are. And so what happens when you use one, you activate the Nadi chakra system. And so if we use a mudra and test a muscle and there's stress, that means there's stress in the nadi chakra system that's actually that you're reading with a muscle test. And then we use acupoints as well, which is a completely different dimension. I mean, that comes from the traditional Chinese system, and we combine them, which was the genius of Richard Up. Before that, I just used one finger motor, one indicator point. I've developed over 20,000 formats, easy. I mean, it's probably more, 40 courses. Well, that was 4 years ago. It's probably getting closer to 45, 50 by now. But, and, you know, we use them for energetic structures, anatomy and physiology, and also psychological states. So when we're using formats, we're accessing stress on the etheric plane. That's what it does. And, you know, we were talking about it in the last class, and we've just had it. But when you do a muscle test, you're actually, what you're doing there, it's neuromuscular, it's physiological, it's physical. And so if the muscle test is showing stress, you're actually demonstrating stress in the nervous system. But also what you can do is when you know, sometimes you can think about something and the muscle test will go down. Or if you look at a format, what's the next one? Oh, the muscle test went down. Anyone ever happened to that too? That's mental plane, because you're thinking about it. Okay? Totally different plane. And that's why it's important to understand what you're doing, because if you have a good mental understanding of what you're doing, you know, then you actually access the mental plane when you're working on your clients. So you're helping them not only in the physical plane with the muscle test, the etheric plane with the formats, but also in the mental emotional plane, because, you know, you access that. And even if you think about it, any kind of emotional response will arise with that. Another interesting thing is actually using symbols. And this is something that we do sometimes. And like you can use, I saw Richard Up do this. I think that's tryptophan, the amino acid. And I did this workshop with Richard. And, you know, he's got those amino acid points. I think you get them at the end there, you know, all the end points that are in. And he's sitting there with the symbol and a magnet going, look, see, that one works on this point. And then he goes, on this point, doesn't work, you know, and he's showing, you know, flipping the magnet, showing how the indicator goes up and down. I thought, oh my God. And then he's getting the Riggler points, and he's getting, like, you know, the vitamin, he puts it on the Riggler point, puts the magnet over, it goes down, puts it in another spot, doesn't go down. And he said, he checked every single Riggler point, couldn't fault one. So that's how, you know, that's what you can do. So using a force through a symbol, that's actually radionics. If you use, like, the Malcolm Ray cards, they've got a magnet and a symbol, and you can put a symbol, a force through a symbol, and it imprints. I mean, in India, they use these yantras like this, and they call them imprints of consciousness. But really what they mean is an imprint on our mental, emotional states. Okay, and so, and that's why, you know, symbol is really in that archetypical Buddhic intuitional realm. That's where it exists, and so you use a force through that, and it really imprints on that level. You know, if you read all that Jung stuff about symbols and stuff like that, that's what it does. We've got a triangle in MK, and I always say, you know, every school of kinesiology's got their own triangle. We've got one, so we can have a school now. Oh, it's in German. Oh, there you go. So at the top it says energetic. You've got to read it though. Energetic structures, chakras, nadis, meridians, acupoints, aura, webbing. Okay. Down there, anatomy and physiology. Over there, psychology, which is emotions, thoughts, belief systems, archetypes. You know, when we work with clients, even a simple 14 muscle balance, you set a goal, that's the psychology. You test muscles, there's the anatomy. You correct meridians, there's your energetic structures. It's like, it's a model of how imbalance works, and so when we balance, we're trying to work on all these three. That's how it works. So that's like a summary of what we've been going. You have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned Webby. What do you mean by that? Passive or?
No, it's energetic. You've ever heard of the etheric web? Ever heard of Tibetan figure eights?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen them in Tibet?
No.
No. I mean, hey, God, they work. I mean, that's for sure. I remember when I was in kinesiology school, someone did this little figure eight on my back, and I sat in shock for 3 hours, like literally in shock. You know? I mean, but you do little ones, you do big ones. And so, you know, I thought, well, what's that? You know, I think someone just called them Tibetan because it sells workshops, sounds good. I mean, it does sound good, Tibetan figure eight, I want to do that. Marketing. Well, a lot of people are in it for business purposes, you know. And so what I figured is what dawned on me, because you can do little ones, and then if you do the AP, you've got all the big ones, you know. And so the little ones and big ones, they can be any size and they all work. And then what I figured was sounds like a frog. There's a frog on the sky. Okay, so so what I figured is the figure eights are probably like the etheric web, and it's like probably like a webbing structure, like a bit like a chainmail like this. And so if it's like that, you could do big ones and affect a lot of it, and little ones affect just a little bit. So I call the figure eights. I mean, I still use it in the same way, but I refer to them as the etheric web. And then it makes sense to me. Otherwise, it just never really makes sense to me. Why does it appear in kinesiology and nowhere else? So that's that. Okay, so let's get along. What is the psychological trauma? This is the ICD-10 classification. So this is the International Classification of Diseases, which is an international standard for all kinds of diseases. You've got this in your thingy. So the psychological trauma, the affected have been in a short or long-term situation which has been especially threatening more than usual, or have been exposed to a catastrophic event which would lead to deep despair within the person. That's the actual, you know. And the thing is about trauma, it's relative and it's subjective. And if the person is traumatized, they are traumatized. What might traumatize one person won't affect another person. So, you know, some people are just more sensitive and can be affected by these things. Okay. DSM-4. So this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 4 by the American Psychiatric Psychiatric Association. Experience, view, or confronted with one or more situations which lead to the real or near death or serious injury or threat to the physical safety of yourself or someone else. Your reaction includes intense fear, helplessness, or horror, with children, depending on the circumstances, agitated behaviour. Okay, so they're the actual definitions of trauma. Okay, so you've got 2 types. Type 1, you've got a single event, and life-threatening, it's unexpected. So they can be, so then you see you've got 2 columns there. One are catastrophes, work-related, an accident like automobile, work-related, industrial reactions, short-term natural disasters. Man-made traumas, criminal violence, sexual or physical abuse, armed robbery, domestic violence. I mean, that's not limited to that, of course, but that's just giving you an idea. Then you've got the type 2, which are repetitive, long-lasting and unforeseen. So a long-lasting natural catastrophe like flood, technological catastrophe like gas, or man-made sexual or physical or child abuse, emotional neglect, abuse, war, fighting, torture, kidnapping, hostage taking, imprisonment, you know, not fun, not very nice. But these are the sort of things that will cause trauma. So the symptoms, according to ICD-10, so then you start getting the breakdown of the different ones. So you've got, you know, acute stress reactions, post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorders, dissociative disorders, enduring personality changes not attributable to brain damage and disease, and traumatic associative disorders. You know, where you've got depression, fear, addiction, eating disorders, borderline personality disorders, all these kind of things. Okay. So the example here is the PTSD, and this is the criteria of post-traumatic stress disorder. So you've got recurring memories of the event with thoughts, perception, or flashbacks. So people with PTSD will get flashbacks all of a sudden. You know, they might wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and go running down the street or something like this. And the trigger stimulus is an image, thoughts, body sensations, and voices. You've got recurring charged dreams of the event or nightmares. There's a movie called Mercury Puzzle with Bruce Willis. I didn't do this. Avoidance behaviour or numbing. So they avoid things, you know, conscious avoidance of thoughts, feelings, or conversations. The avoidance of activities, and also they can't remember the important aspects of the event, and so often they have like blackouts where they don't remember whole parts of their life. They can say, well, I can't remember between I was 9 and 14, I don't remember a thing. Something like this is just completely gone. Hyperarousal, so excessive jumpiness, difficulty in falling and staying asleep, concentration difficulties, irritability and temper tantrums. A feeling of helplessness and speechless, and cognitive dissonance, which is everything is as it was, nothing is how it was. So it's like a dichotomy. So from this, 3 major obstacles after PTSD. Hyperarousal, we've got avoidance behaviour, and flashbacks. Okay. So we've got the first hypothesis, and this was worked out by Alexandra, and she's Austrian, and one of her good friends is one of the leading psychologists in Germany, and they were having a big discussion about what kinesiology does with respect to trauma. And what they figured out is kinesiology works on the hyperarousal. So, you know, understanding that if you're working with someone with trauma, and we saw that there was those 3 obstacles, you're going to be working on this, you know, hyperaroused state, the fidgety, this is where you want to focus. So what you can do is put those symptoms in as the issue and set up and balance to those. Okay. Kinesiology can influence the other obstacles through this. So once the hyperarousal comes down, then the other obstacles are there and can be dealt with. So basically when the hyperarousal is toned down, they can start dealing with the flashbacks and the avoidance and the numbing. so I don't feel anything. You get these flashbacks. Okay. So that's the first hypothesis. That's what they worked out, and it seems to be it's important that it's an area where you can work. Then the second hypothesis is that the traumatic event is a conditioned stimulus, or it's conditioning. And so this means what conditioning is that what was a neutral stimulus, for most people would be a neutral stimulus, becomes an emotional stimulus. So basically an example is you're standing on a street corner and along comes a red Mercedes. I hope no one here drives in that red Mercedes. I had that once. I said red Audi and someone had a red Audi. So now I don't say Audi conditions. Anyway, so along comes a red Mercedes and it blows a tyre, veers, come flying towards you, just jump out of the way, smashes there, just missed you. You're like, oh my God, you know. And what happens the next time you see, it doesn't even have to be the same car, the same model red Mercedes, what happens? You're like, the condition, the stimulus is now conditioned. Because every time you see a red Mercedes, you have that reaction. And so this is what's happening with post-traumatic stress. They've got this severe conditioning happening to different stimuli, and often say like people have been in war zones, it just can be just loud sounds like they experience, all of a sudden they'll trigger. You know, the two most common kinds of things that give post-traumatic stress disorder are either war or abuse. So let's have a look at conditioning. And so conditioning is the sort of Pavlovian conditioning. So what happens, this is Pavlov over there, and he had this famous experiment, you may have heard of it, where he had a dog. So everyone talks about Pavlov's dog, you know, you go to these conferences, they're talking about his dog. I mean, his dog is so famous. But what he did is that he would like play a tone or something every time he fed the dog. And then later on, he'd play the tone without feeding it, the dog would start salivating. So all of a sudden, the dog knew that that tone was food, so there was a reaction. I mean, that's a more positive one, but of course, the negative conditioning is much stronger. And so what happens is you've got on the right just a diagram of actually what happens in conditioning, where you've got information's coming in like, because it's a memory, you've got hippocampus, and also in the amygdala, the conditioning is like an emotional memory that forms in the amygdala. So conditioning is actually a form of memory. Okay? And it's certainly not explicit memory. And so so what happens, you've got all these bits inside the amygdala, the lateral amygdala, which receives information, the central amygdala, which is the actual output of the amygdala, and other parts of the amygdala, the intercalated cells, and also the basolateral amygdala, are involved with creating the conditioning or creating the memory that stimulus is worthy of an emotional response. Because for me, when I think about the amygdala, basically, I mean, it's quite complex, but basically what the amygdala does, it decides, am I going to be emotional or not? Like, is that stimulus emotion worthy? No. If it is, oh, there's a tiger coming, better run. So fear. I mean, it's survival. It's a basic survival thing. So anyway, let's have a look. Missed the button. Okay, here we go. So normally, this is what happens. You've got a neutral stimulus comes into the thalamus, and normally it would pass on to the cortex. You've got your thalamocortical axis, which is part of how you consciously process sensory information. Then that gets fed over into the lateral amygdala. And then from there, if it's neutral, it just stays there. It disappears. The lateral amygdala goes boring. Doesn't get any further. Then what happens? So imagine there's a neutral stimulus, say the red Mercedes, but now it's aversive because it almost killed me. And so then this goes, as both stimuli go into the lateral amygdala goes danger, and then it sends over to the intermediate basolateral amygdala where you've got these so-called fear neurons. Okay, I mean, of course, if you're, like we're talking about fear, but you could have like rage neurons or whatever. Okay, and so you've got these fear neurons, and the fear neuron says fear, and it goes to the central amygdaloid nucleus where you've got the output nuclei, and the output nuclei go down to the hypothalamus and PAD, and you have the emotional response in the body. Because when you're angry or you're expressing fear, it's in your body. Your heart rate changes, your blood pressure goes up, your breathing changes, your muscles tense. All these things happen, right? And they're all, the signal comes from the amygdala, the central amygdala, goes to the hypothalamus and mainly the PAD, and that organises the body response. So, and that's survival, okay? Because the idea is that you learn that that stimulus can now possibly be dangerous. So what happens is, next time you get the neutral stimulus in a safe situation, it's now conditioned so the lateral amygdala nucleus goes, that's dangerous. Sends it to the fear, so you have the fear response. Okay. And so what happens when this starts getting constantly like a really deep, in post-traumatic, it's really deep. So working with the conditioning is very important. Okay. I'm not going to show you like the details of like all this detailed stuff, but I'm giving you some ideas of where you can work. Okay. So, but guess what? We can actually, there's a whole process called extinction where we can extinguish the conditioning. Okay. And this happens through the cortex because your cortex starts going, well, after you see a few red Mercedes, hang on, this isn't dangerous. So it sends, so down there you've got these extinction neurons, the E, and they then project onto GABA neurons, which actually inhibit the fear neurons. And also in the intercalated islands in the amygdala, they actually inhibit the central amygdala neurons. And then all of a sudden, you don't experience fear anymore every time you see a red Mercedes. But what you notice here, the fear neuron is still receiving the message that that's dangerous. So you don't actually get rid of it. What you do is you learn that within the context, in certain contexts, it's safe. It's like a safety mechanism. Because what can happen is you can get like a recall of it. And say if you go into a new context, the hippocampus goes, oh, remember that was dangerous? And it actually inhibits the extinction neuron. And then all of a sudden a fear response happens again. Okay. So they're the steps of the of conditioning. And what can happen, and so first you've got a neutral stimulus, then there's a dangerous aversive stimulus, happens in conjunction with the neutral stimulus, it creates a conditioning. Your cortex can learn that can be okay, but in certain circumstances it's possible to have a recall. Okay, and that's what this is all about. So neurotransmitters involved in conditioning. Oh. We've got all those pictures there. We can better write these down fast. So you've got norepinephrine, dopamine, acetylcholine, opioids, cannabinoids, ACTH and vasopressin, cortisol, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. and they all have various roles. Surprisingly, dopamine actually enhances conditioning. Some of them enhance the extinction. They all have a role in the conditioned stimulus. Of course, as it's information flowing, as it comes into that actual information pathway that we were looking at, you know, all those blue arrows, they're glutamate pathways. It's information flow. And the GABA here is actually acting, you know, I always think of GABA having two roles. One role is to inhibit, stop it. The other role is to affect the timing of how information flows. So to make sure that, you know, it basically removes noise from the signal. It's an adjustment. So there's two roles of GABA. Here we're looking at GABA as an inhibitor, stop it, finish the thing. And so these are the other neurotransmitters that are actually involved in that. Interesting that you've got opioids and cannabinoids, because they're the opioids are the neurotransmitters that opiates bind to their receptors, and the cannabinoid, well, there's only two cannabinoids. There's one cannabinoid. So we've got receptors in our brain that cannabis, or the cannabis substance, the active substance of cannabis binds to receptors in our brain. They're called cannabinoids. There's one neurotransmitter called anandamide that does that. Okay. So that's that. So this is quite interesting. The different roles that these take place in different parts of that pathway that we're looking at. So again, that gives you ideas of balancing, you know, balancing neurotransmitters in the amygdala and a little bit in the thalamus, because remember the things coming through the thalamus to the amygdala, like if it's vision that's coming from your retina to your lateral genicular nucleus into your amygdala. Okay, so that's how conditioning works. So what I want to talk about now is a little bit, let's start talking about kinesiology, right? We're all kinesiologists. What I'm going to do is give you like some acupressure ideas that you can use, and certainly that you'll be able to, you know, like if you've got clients, that you can certainly show them what acupoints can use, okay? So they can like homework. So again, just to recap, we've got this the balance triangle, energetic structures, anatomy and physiology, and the psychology. So when we're working with energetic structures, we're up here on the top point. We want the trauma is the psychological event, and the effect in the body is in the nervous system. You know, like we've got the conditioning, the memory flashbacks, hyper-arousal. All these are symptoms of the nervous system. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about under and over energy. I mean, I know you probably understand that, but I just want to be sure, because I've always liked to look at things in a different way. So balanced energy flow, like through meridians, like normally when meridians balance, the energy flows. When energy flow is balanced, it means that you've got the right amount flowing at the correct time in the appropriate amount. Do you know what I mean? So you haven't got too much, you haven't got too less. Sometimes there shouldn't be much, and that's normal, and sometimes there should be a lot more, and that's normal. Okay? So the under energy is interesting because that means the energy flow is blocked. So you can have a meridian that's blocked or a chakra that's blocked, you know. And the way I look at chakras is the yin under energy means you can't, you know, because chakras to me, they're like doorways. We exchange, they're energy exchange portals. So we exchange energy with people. So sometimes it's appropriate for you to give energy, sometimes receive. Meridians, especially if we're talking about the chi flow, they just flow one way. Okay, and so the yin and yang is more in the meridian pairs, but chakras themselves have a yin aspect. It's about how you receive that energy, and the yang is how you give that energy. The most common example I use is the throat chakra, which is one of communication. So when I'm yang, that means I want to express and communicate what I need to say, and yin is I'm listening and understanding what you're trying to say, and I can respond to that. So under energy is blocked. So so basically means you're not getting the energy that you need at that time when it's appropriate. So right now it's appropriate for me to talk. If I couldn't say anything, or I was just saying gobbledygook that you couldn't understand, then I'd be yang under energy. Or if you can't understand, you don't listen. Anyone who doesn't listen, it's yin under energy throat chakra. So, okay, yin under energy throat chakra, better balance that for you so you can listen to me. Over energy is the other state. So it means there's too much energy flow, and certainly that's something that we've always used in kinesiology. And Richard was a big one for it. I am too. I mean, everything over under energy. I use it a lot. And so it means there's too much. Like yang over energy, someone who talks and talks and talks and doesn't stop talking, throat chakra. Blah, 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 blah. I'll talk about the fly going up the wall. Okay, listen to this. Or yin over is like you're receiving too much. It's very excessive quality. But that's what it is. So, I want to talk a little bit about meridians and chi. So, okay, understanding under energy. Okay, so here we've got, say if this is normal energy, right? It's full. It's normal energy. So is under energy either under tonified? That means we haven't put enough in there. So there was never enough in there. It's not enough. So we call that under tonified. Or was it over sedated? Like you sedated it too much. So normally when we think of under energy, we would say we need to tonify. But would you need to tonify if it was over sedated, or would you actually have to treat the sedation points? That's weird, isn't it? You're treating the sedation points for under energy. Well, if you know how to test for it, it actually works. Okay. So you've actually got two types of under energy. You've got under tonified and you've got over sedated. So this is my model. I did this diagram about chi formation. It's adapted from Giovanni Macciotta, Foundations of Chinese Medicine. Fantastic book. Amazing. Bad thing like this. But basically, chi, you've got two types of chi. You've got this, like on the left, you've got what's called the post-evanescence. Basically, that's the chi that flows around your meridians, and it comes from your food and the air that you breathe. So basically, you can see it starts in the stomach, you eat food, and so not only does the stomach start the protein digestion, but it also energetically starts extracting chi from the food. One friend of mine used to say, I've got to go down to the farmer's market because I get happy veggies there, straight off the farmers. And you go down there and they just, like you go down to the farmer's market and they sing them live. It's like they're almost talking, do you know what I mean? They've got chi. It's not like you're getting frozen veggies that you microwave. How much chi have they got? None. And sort of then it's passes to the spleen, so it's called food chi or uchi is the term. Then it passes to the lung meridian, where the air gets added up to it, and so that's called air qi. That's why the Chinese say that qi flow actually begins in the lungs. It's actually lung, large intestine, stomach. It starts in the lungs. And from there, it's called gathering qi. And so if it's sufficient, if you're breathing nice, fresh mountain air and eating nice, fresh, organic, freshly cooked food, you're getting good qi into your system. It's not deficient. But if it's deficient, you have to start drawing on your pre-Evanescence or your ancestral qi or stuff you got at birth. And there's some people say that this qi runs out. When this qi runs out, it's when you die. So you start burning this up, then you're not burning the candle at both ends. So this actually comes, you've got the yang essence of the father and the yin essence of the mother. I see that as they come from the sperm and the egg. You've got healthy sperm and healthy egg that made you. Because all of you at one stage were a sperm and an egg, every single one of you. Imagine that. There you are. And this, when it combines, you get the first cell, and this is the conception essence of the fetus. And from there, the yin and yang essence of that, which is not exactly the same as what you had, because once they combine, they become something else. You've got the yang is the gate of life, or they call it the Ming Men. You may have heard of that if you've done like Tai Chi or anything like this. And the yin is called the pre-Evanescence, which becomes the kidney essence or jing, which you find in the 8 extra meridians. And together they form original qi or yuan qi, and they come through the source points into each meridian. So if it's deficient, you start using that up. You need that to tonify it. Then that becomes true qi. And the true qi has 2 components. You've got defensive qi or wei qi, and nutritive qi or yin qi, which is what you find in the main meridians, and that nourishes all your internal organs and muscles and bones. Where on the left, the defensive qi is defensive. It does 2 things. It's like your energetic immune system, where you actually blocking out the pathogenic factors, which are like wind, cold, heat, like this, and also, like my friend was telling me, it's like the wei qi is also how you interact with the environment. It governs how you interact with the outside world. So this is the qi. Now, acupressure. Anyone seen that before? Okay, so acupressure for trauma. So you've got the Shen and Ko cycles. The Shen cycle's obviously the one going around with the fat arrows, and the Ko cycle's the thin arrows. So the Shen cycle's the cycle of creation, and wood feeds fire, feeds earth, etc. Where the Ko cycle is the controlling one, where it's like if say a fire's getting a bit out of control, water will go, hey, tone it down there. Where wood will be going, yep, off you go. So these cycles work in harmony together to control how energy flows through our system. And I always find it curious that, even the word 5 elements, right? When I was researching, I wrote a course for beginners called Principles of Kinesiology, and I decided to go to first principles and not look at what anyone else had done. And I was reading a translation of the ancient Chinese text, and this guy was saying that like talking about how they use the word 5 elements, the actual character can translate to element, house, or quality. He was saying 5 elements is really not a good translation of it. It's more like 5 qualities. Now that makes sense to me. There are 5 different qualities of things can have in the universe. So if something's got a fire quality, it's expansive, it's rising. Or if it's got a metal quality, it's contracting. So or water quality is going down, it's liquid. So they're just qualities. And if you think of the 5 qualities, then you can see how things phase from one quality to the other. And we have all these qualities should be in harmony and in balance. And so when the 5 elements are in harmony, you've got these five qualities in harmony. Now that makes sense. So looking at the water elements, so when working, so you know, like I showed you, we spoke about some balancing ideas before, and so this is more like getting into, say, acupressure. So this is talking about corrections and how you're going to correct. So with the in the books, when I went to the first principles, they were saying that you should tonify and sedate through the Shen cycle, and also you've got the low points, and also you've got these other points. The source points are the points that that bring in the Jin, the Yuan original Qi. You've got these other ones called accumulation points, where if there's excess energy in the meridian, that's where it tends to congregate. So they use the accumulation points to sedate and the source points to tonify. And you can use obviously the low points between, you know, the kidney low point will sedate kidney, but it'll tonify bladder, and the bladder low point will sedate bladder and tonify kidney. Okay, so these are they're the command points of the bladder and kidney meridian. So then you've got your tonify and sedation points. So to tonify bladder, you would use the Shen bladder 67, because that would be the to tonify, that would come from metal, so that would be the metal point of bladder. And to sedate, you would use the wood point. And the same the other way around. The kidney 7 is the metal point on kidney, and kidney 1 is the wood point. Okay. And then you've got the low points, source points. Now you'll notice with source points, I've got triple heater 4. So triple heater 4 is the source point of triple heater. And what's interesting, what they were saying when I was doing all this reading, is when the original Qi comes in, it goes to triple heater first, then the other 11 meridians. So if there's actually a block in triple heater, it's not going to get anywhere. So if you actually have to do the source points, you need to check triple heater 4 will tonify any meridian. And if it shows, it means that the source, that the original Qi is being blocked in triple heater and not getting to that meridian with respect to that meridian. Because if you're correcting bladder and you need to do triple heater 4, it means, when bladder needs tonifying of the original Qi, triple heater 4 isn't working. Might work in other cases because everything's always issue dependent, right? So they're the things. So then we go, okay, so then how do we know if it's under tonified, and how do we know if it's over sedated? Easy, we check a light and deep touch. So there you go, under tonified. Under tonified by metal means we would check bladder 67 and kidney 7 deep. And this is working with the assumption here is in trauma, the water element is under energy because you're in the 3rd stage stress. You've got low levels of cortisol. It's just shock, And originally, when you've got, the overstate, it's like you're adapting and everything like this. But in trauma, water is under energy. That's the assumption we're making here. So if we want to check the Shen cycle under tonified, you check bladder 67 and kidney 7 at the same time, deep touch. And if they show, I like to pulse acupoints, I don't go in, I bought a Tai Chi, but I never use it because I like to feel them. or I'm going to use light on them, or a symbol, or things like this. Get creative, you know. Or it could be undertonified by yuan qi, which comes from, that's your original qi from the 8 extra meridians. So you would check bladder 64, kidney 3, and triple heater 4. So that they're timed, so you just test them on one side and then the other, and then hold them, pulse. If they show, go pulse one, pulse the other. And in this situation, you might be there pulsing them for like 20 minutes in whatever shows. Or you've got within the element and the low points, so again, they're going to show deep touch. If it's over sedated, means it's over sedated by wood, Schenck cycles, so we're going to try the acupoints light touch. We touch the light, means it's over. No light, over, deep, under. No. And then within the element, you've got the, again, the low points and the accumulation points, again, all of them light touch. So that tells you if it is undertonified or over sedated. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So with the 3 points, to get your client to maybe hold one?
Oh no, well, kidney 3 and bladder 64 are just on either side of the foot.
Yeah.
And the other one, you just do one side and then the other one is, yeah, because I mean, bladder 64, you know, you just literally.
Yeah.
So it works out. That's the cool thing about command points when you're doing the yin and yang pairs, they're always on the same, you know, area, foot or hand. Any other questions?
So you can take up to 20 minutes to actually feel a pulse.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I sit down and get comfortable. No, literally, because if you need to hold a point for some time, you should be comfortable. You don't want to be standing like this and getting all stress in your body. Then you can't be in that relaxed space. I mean, I encourage you to feel and tune into the energy of your clients. I think that's important. Yes?
Yeah, so do you use this for a correction after you've done a lot of setup, or do you use it for acute situations?
Well, you can. Yeah, I mean, this is for under energy in the water element. So you could use it. I mean, to me, it's more like a correction, like what we're talking about here. Like before, when I was talking about doing the balance, we were talking about the amygdala and the hippocampus and the cortex. You've got this hyper arousal. So if we bring it back, we've got someone comes in, they've got trauma. So we know that they're going to have hyperarousal, they're going to have flashbacks and avoidance, numbing, blackouts. Now, don't do it alone. They should be under the care of someone in the mental health area, like a psychotherapy, psychologist, or something like this. And what you can do is help them, you know, you work on the hyperarousal. So you target the hyperarousal. You say, okay, you've got this hyperaroused state. Use that as your setup and you know, do whatever balancing you can do for the amygdala, the hippocampus and all that. And for those of you who are just here, you could do the fear system. If you come and do the next 4, actually what I just showed you is out of the next 4 manual, and I actually have a whole thing for conditioned stimulus. And I know, like, Alexandra's used it a lot, and she's worked with it, and she says you've got to work on that conditioning. It's so important to do that. And this is like some acupressure. So if you show them, say if bladder 7, 67 and kidney 7 showed as the ones that really need it, like you've got there 6 different combinations. So you're looking for the priority one, really. So you can show them, okay, you know, when you go home and you're feeling it, hold these points, you know. And so that would give you like a way of working. But you can use, you know, for working with the amygdala and that, you can use any, you know, like there's other ways like LEAP or AP, and, you know, they're all, you know, hippocampus, cortex, you know. So you're sort of getting, okay, there's the balance. You're also going to, you know, as stuff starts coming up, they should be getting some kind of psychotherapy as well, helping them process it, because they've got to start actually, you know, if they're starting to get memories of it, they've got to actually process that and come to terms with it. So that all that's got to happen as well. And so in the meantime, while they're doing that, you're doing this alongside it. And you might have to do that balance over and over again. Well, that's okay. Reticular activating system. You guys really like it. Someone asked me that the other day. Well, that's generally to do with attention and stuff. So, I mean, you could, I mean, if it shows up, you know, and certainly if they're starting to help process it and become aware of it and be more aware of what's going on, you know, like I guess with the avoidance and that, it could help there, you know, thinking about it. So you could try it. I mean, the thing is with kinesiology, we work with, you know, we're removing stress from the system. So you can have this thing, you can try if it works, if it shows, it works. I mean, I don't know. As soon as I say, no, it won't show, it will show. I did that once in class, months, conditioned, right? Yeah. So now I say, try it. If you really feel your client needs it, they probably do. Because everyone's different, and how it manifests in one person to the next will be totally different.
What is the psychology in this pathway, Dr. S&E?
That was the output. Now it's the central amygdala, which is basically all the processing that happens in the amygdala. It goes to the central amygdala where you've got the output neurons. Any other questions? Thank you for coming. I'm so happy that so many of you came here.